What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of The Wrap. That's Mark Ennis. That's Andy Sweeney. I am Tyler Greever. We will start, of course, with the only game that was played this week. Kentucky pulls out a 27-17 win over Mississippi State. Guys, this looked like a vintage Mark Stoops team, not the one that's been tossing the ball around the yard, because if Chris Rodriguez wasn't in there, I don't know if Kentucky wins this game. Hard runs, and he leads them to a big win.
Well, I found it to be interesting at halftime, or maybe in the first half, Stoops took away Scangarello's playbook. It was like we're not going to be cute. We're going to run C-Rod 30 times, something they should have been doing last week, which was a big part of that analysis. Big picture on this game, it sets up to where they can be 9-3, and if they can go on the road and beat Tennessee, which I do not think they can do, they can be 9 games and dream about yet another 10-win season, but it steady things. If they go into the break, we've talked about this, if they go into their bye, I mean, you could be looking at 4 straight losses. You could be looking at, the wheels coming off, and we'd be talking about 6-7 wins. Who can they beat? Missouri, Vandy, potentially Louisville on the schedule. So they had to get the win. It was not pretty in the first half. They did all the things, all the sloppy things that we have seen, but a big second half, winning the third and fourth quarters, they get the win, and they needed it.
And don't ignore the other side of the ball either. This Mississippi State team has spent all week talking about this is different. They do things differently. They're a lot more physical. They ran for almost 200 yards against Arkansas. They don't ever run for 200 yards against anybody with Leach there. And instead, they possessed the ball themselves the whole time, held Mississippi State to 22 yards rushing. They only tried 10 run plays the whole game. Will Rogers was never comfortable. And this was sort of vintage, like deep down in his bones, truth serum, I'll admit this is how I like it, Mark Stoops.
Will Levis is being beat up. Yeah. They cannot take 8-step drops. They cannot let deep passes develop down the field. They're going to have to do everything off play action there. I mean, I just think for me, they have to revert back. I think they've tried, and I think the explosive stuff is there, and they'll still have some of that.
It's hard for a Kentucky fan to be unhappy about what happened, but I probably cannot help but get to the end of that game and be like, where was this? Yeah. Why didn't we do this last week? Just put Sharon under center and just run Rodriguez aggressively the whole game. Certainly that game plan would have worked better than what they tried.
Tyler, it's what they have to do going forward.
But see, the thing with that is, and I just think it's such a weird balance for us to talk about, so I can't imagine the Kentucky fans, they have good receivers. They have 3 explosive guys who need to touch the ball at some point in time. They have the quarterback, which was the biggest problem for so long. But you just don't have the offensive line, which is the one thing you've been able to count on.
I know everyone wants Will Levis to throw for 350 yards and 3-4 touchdowns and have it look like it looked at the beginning of the season. Remember, at the beginning of the season, though, C-Rod was not there. Right, it wouldn't have looked only like that if C-Rod were there. I mean, we know that.
And don't look now. I think the last thing I would ever want to do, if I'm anybody, much less Kentucky, is try to go down to Knoxville and play some sort of up and down game. Not with that team.
Well, I don't know of anybody that can play with Tennessee that way right now. And Kentucky's just making too many killer mistakes still. Too many self-inflicted wounds. Barron Brown had a punt return that goes for a touchdown, gets called back for a penalty. They coughed up the ball twice. The team's not playing as cleanly as I think many thought they would, which kind of leads me into this question because they're going into the bye week. If you had to grade them, if you had to evaluate them, how would you do so far in the season?
I'd be C+. I mean, I could not do a B right now, not with a loss to South Carolina, not without feeling that winning 9 games is something that's not going to happen. You wanted to go into your bye, feeling good about at least 9-3 to get to that 10th win. And I feel worse about Tennessee than I felt at the beginning. I feel worse about Georgia.
That's a tough one too.
I mean, I might feel worse about Louisville. I don't know. Only if they let my man Brock Doman, sling the rock around a little bit. So we'll see. But I mean, no, I'll give them about a C+ is where I would settle in.
Yeah, I think it's about right. They haven't really gotten to very much of the place where you'd want them to differentiate themselves from different years. Tennessee and Georgia, those are the litmus tests. And you did well in this one. I don't want to sink or diminish this one. This is big. Mississippi State was playing well. Mike Leach said they were overconfident.
They're a respected team. Mississippi State was respected.
But yeah, I think it's about the right grade because that South Carolina game is an anchor. It's a complete blown opportunity.
But what Greever mentioned, and this will be my last thing on Kentucky, is that first half was a mess. You had a fumble, punt, missed field goal, all in the first half.
Yep.
The good thing is you were tied like you were against South Carolina, and you didn't spit the bit in the second half. You elevated your play, scored 24 points in the second half.
I think the rub is that a lot of people thought this year would be a special season for Kentucky, and that you kind of touched on that last week. The special season is over. This UK team would separate itself from the past ones. They could still do that, beating Tennessee and Georgia. Those would be two gigantic wins, and honestly, winning one of them, I think, would be a big deal.
Absolutely.
But right now, this kind of just looks like another good Kentucky team that's not exactly great. It's an entirely different conversation for Louisville coming out of the bye week. There is a grade that comes to mind for me immediately, and I kind of just want to hear you guys right off the bat. How would you evaluate Louisville so far and where it could go the rest of the season?
You go ahead and go first.
I mean, yeah,
on this one.
Like, it's not an F, but it's not anything better than that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Mine's a D.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we can settle
pretty
with
clear.
They're
that.
not
It's a D.
failing because you haven't fired him, you know,
Yeah,
and
right.
they've done something. Oddly enough, I think maybe the biggest surprise out of all this, looking at every advanced metric there is, Louisville's in the top 25-ish on defense.
Yep.
And really, if anything could better encapsulate Scott's whole time here, is it's like you have something that's statistically good that doesn't help you. They pile up stats until they need those stats, and then they don't get them. And in some ways, the achievements of a UCF game or a USF game, or how well they did against Virginia this last game, all it really does is mock you, because it's like you can do it, you just don't in these critical moments, and it's been agonizing. They haven't failed because they have certainly not quitting. They certainly haven't given up, and I did see the blooms of something that I kind of like in what they did against Virginia. But every single time you sort of feel like, okay, this is how it's going to be. Well, this is when they sort of go out there and disappoint you again. And it's Scott's job to make us not say that.
I think we all have the same grade. I mean, for me, think how much this weekend the remaining part of their schedule changed. I mean,
Yeah.
Leary's out at NC State. I mean, they are a very much affected team with him being out. I mean, I don't know.
Madison turned it back into a pumpkin a little bit.
James Madison
Right.
lost on the road as a top 25 team. UofL is in this spot to where it's nice that we're thinking, hey, you got a shot here against Pittsburgh and everything. But these are the games that Scott Satterfield doesn't win. Yes, it's there again where I think there'll be a nice crowd. I think it will be a good atmosphere and a winnable game.
It's his last chance.
Yeah.
It's Scott's last chance to have the most people possible supporting him in sort of one last push to win a meaningful game. I've been open-minded up to this. If they lose Pitt and it looks bad, that's it.
He attempted to make some changes going into that Virginia game, talking about involving Lance Taylor more. That remains to be seen. I don't exactly know how that division works between him and Lance, but nevertheless, and he was in more defensive meetings. Between those two things, what do you think is the most important to continue moving forward if they are going to have success down the stretch, if they're going to change the narrative on what he's done with this program?
With those options, I would go with Lance Taylor.
The offense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
a lot of that, again, hinges on, is Malik Cunningham going to be healthy? Is Brock Doman going to keep playing? And if he does, can he play as well as he just did? But to me, the offense has been so inconsistent at times. They haven't hit kill shots when they've had the chances. They haven't been able to.
And there haven't been many chances.
Exactly, and when the
Right.
defense does get a string of stops, when you can get a touchdown to extend a lead, they haven't really been able to do it. So I think that offensive consistency is huge in this final stretch.
Well, and I think we've all watched them, with the exception of the Virginia game, and felt like, man, this offense, it doesn't always feel like it's a whole, like all the parts fit together and you can see what they're getting at with each little thing. It felt more like this is what Malik's good at, and then everything else is just sort of a derivative, from that. And the one thing about the Virginia game that I think everybody felt is like, oh, this was an offense where, like, inside running, play action off of it, and quick game off of it. Then you were faking those quick game stuff, and you got forward up the field for the touchdown, or they worked the middle of the field better than Malik ever has. And it just felt like, oh, this is a whole offense. I think get Malik to do that stuff. And call it for him that way, too.
Okay.
And call it.
I thought you were calling for Doman. I thought you were going for Doman.
I'm not.
Okay,
I'm
that's
not.
why I thought you were building up to that.
But I do think there was, like, just morale of everyone sort of seemed to be a little bit more bought in, and it's at least on the table. I think Malik's always played like a guy who doesn't believe they have any other option. And,
man, that's
and
a good
now,
way to put it.
That's not true. If they come out there and Malik's like 1 of 7 on the first drive and he's not letting it go and he's being hesitant, man, get him out.
There we go. I like that.
Right,
listen,
that's what you were waiting for, right?
That's the thing that maybe we learned with Virginia is that Malik has struggles. There is what Mark said, and we didn't know if that existed on this team. And we know it does exist to some extent, and at some point, if they go to it and it's a disaster, then all of this is for naught.
Right.
But that's what we do in sports commentary.
It is. It is. So we lead up to another game where Scott Satterfield has another chance in another big-time game. But I've said it here before, and I'm closing with it. There's no reason for me or us to pick them until they actually go out and win that game.
That's fair.
And that's just where I stand with it. But we're not far from basketball season. We're going to take a hard turn, and we've gotten some big-time recruiting news. Obviously, Big Blue Madness happened for UK. Louisville Live is coming up for Louisville. We know Aaron Bradshaw is committed to the Wildcats, and it seems like a matter of time before maybe DJ Wagner follows suit. A lot of the recruiting predictions are swinging that way now. What does this Bradshaw commitment mean for both Kentucky and Louisville? And then, in turn, what could happen with DJ Wagner as that remains to be seen?
Well, I think for me, the Bradshaw thing means nothing for Louisville. I don't think he was going to go to Louisville. I think it was Kentucky or G League, and I think those were the two options, have been the two options for a little while. And quite frankly, as we know, Calipari's stockpiling talent. Now, whether that means they're going to flame out in the NCAA tournament, which we've seen, that's a different discussion. But as far as him loading up on top prospects, top shooting guards, top point guards with DJ Wagner coming to the fold, Ugonna Kingsley, now you pair him with Aaron Bradshaw. There's rumors that, Oscar could even come back for next year to make, $3, $4, $5 million or whatever it is. There is a stockpiling. There's always attrition, of course. But the Aaron Bradshaw, that locks up what some recruiting people think is a guy that might have the biggest upside and a guy that the G League did want. And for DJ, the thing that we'll never know, and I wish we would know, maybe they'll tell us, but I don't expect it to be the case, is when did everyone know that Kentucky was going to get DJ Wagner? How much did Louisville ever think they were going to get him? I mean, I think with the hiring of Milt, they did. I think they made a run, and there's no doubt the fan base, a lot of recruiting people thought that it was going to be the case, not going to Louisville Live. I mean, we know where this is trending. Travis Branham, put the crystal ball prediction out there a couple days. I mean, it's just a huge get as Kentucky continues to stockpile talent. The Bradshaw thing, not a bad look for Louisville. The DJ Wagner thing, everyone knows what the conversation was when Kenny Payne was hired about him, and it's flipped that much in the last 6 months. It's unbelievable.
I think the thing with DJ Wagner is it was simultaneously the best opportunity to kind of just immediately flip the recruiting narrative about Louisville and Kentucky that's
Sure.
a decade old now, and it would have been the single best thing Kenny Payne could have done in terms of PR and sort of the morale boost and what it means
To announce that he's here.
Right.
Like a big announcement.
But it was also, and so that's why everyone got excited, but it was also, without question, the hardest one he could have picked, right? Like this is DeJuan Wagner's son. They've been in on this kid in this context recruiting him to Kentucky for a lot longer than Kenny Payne has been trying to recruit them to Louisville. Like it was simultaneously a high-risk, high-reward opportunity, and you didn't hit it. Kenny was like the thing that was supposed to be a given while we wait to see about the rest was the recruiting. He hasn't hit it yet, and he does need a win, and he needs to have one soon.
With that being said, how important is Louisville Live? Not even for a look. We know there's going to be pomp, circumstance, festivities, and all that, but we also know that there's going to be some high-profile recruits in attendance, and it's probably time for Kenny Payne and this staff to hit. How vital is this event for him to make a statement for where that recruiting class could go?
I think. I don't know if it's like life or death, but it sure would be amazing to sort of set that trend, or sort of to set that as a tradition that happens or continues, and to send that message as an answer to sort of what just happened here with Big. He needs a big time win, and even if they're a little bit more future oriented, like you just need to see guys picking Louisville again that have like elite options. It's been a really long time, and he needs that. That's what he's supposed to. That was the selling point.
Yeah, that was the selling point. I think what Mark is not what you're struggling with is, but it was a selling point, and it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
And there's no clarity on, okay, so what's the line to where we can start asking, what's going on here. Is it, again, without
When's
getting
it fair to say, like, you're not doing it?
Yeah, yes. You know, A.J. Johnson, I don't want to get too into the weeds, but he's going to be there Louisville Live. It's believed it's between Louisville and Texas.
Yeah.
They lost out in the offseason. Listen, you lose to Chris Beard in Texas. We know that guy can recruit at Texas, but you got to go win one of those, and that's the prize of the 2023 class that they could go get. To me, that's story number one. Louisville Live on Friday is more for 2024. Yeah. I mean, I think Kenny Payne is going to have to do a lot of work in the transfer portal this offseason, but A.J. Johnson, for people that don't pay attention too much, that is the guy. But I mean, it's difficult for us analyzing because everyone wants to give him time. He is owed time. He is owed time after what was left with Chris Mack. So, you know, IARP, NCAA stuff is still out there. So all of that is understood, but you got to win a battle. They got to get a landmark recruit, and that's why DJ Wagner hurt so much, is because that would have been an immediate, it would have been the immediate, and then he would have done what Pierce Clarkson has done with football is, hey, come join me. That's what Kentucky's done. That's what you wanted in some way for Kenny Payne to do. He gets time, but I think it's okay that the fan base is like, we need a little bit more talent. They need more talent going into this season, so they're better than a 500 team.
A new coach always earns grace in a honeymoon period, especially that, you know, this homecoming that Louisville basketball has sold with Kenny Payne, and I think people have enjoyed that. But I agree with you in that the point of bringing Kenny Payne here to coach was not the fact that he was just a Louisville great and has a great name here. It's the fact that he's developed talent and gotten talent over the years. So that's the first domino we kind of need to evaluate over these next couple of months. We're a long way from figuring that out. We'll just deal with all the offseasons.
We're close to basketball, though.
It's kind of weird. That calendar starts getting busy. We start having more fun when that happens. Mark Ennis, Andy Sweeney, Tyler Greever, this has been The Wrap. Thanks for joining us.